I've wanted a bandsaw for many years, but I didn't have the space for one. Now that I've finished building my shop, I finally purchased a new bandsaw. The bandsaw I ended up with is not the first one I purchased. A couple of months ago, I bought this bandsaw. I got it out of the box and started putting it together. Once I had the stand built, I attached the machine to it and continued with the rest of the setup. When it was time to fire it up for the first time, I ran it for a couple of seconds and then the blade stopped moving. The motor was still running, but not the blade. I turned it off and after some investigation, I found the drive belt had come off. I put it back on and manually turned the lower wheel, and sure enough, the drive belt popped off again after only 3 turns of the wheel. And this happened every time. So I contacted the company that I bought it from, and long story short, I had to send it back. I was quite disappointed, but I was pleased with the customer service from both King Canada and Elite Tools where I bought it. Some good did come out of this though. After seeing the size of the bandsaw, I realized that it may not be enough for my needs. I want to be able to resaw the boards that I pulled off the walls of the barn, and they're all 5 inches or more. So I saved my pennies a little while longer, and when I had enough saved, I bought this. This is the Rikon 14-inch Deluxe Bandsaw Model 10-326, and this is a thing of beauty. It has a 13-inch resaw capacity, so that should be enough to manage just about any of the wood that I reclaim from the barn. My first step is to get this from the truck into the shop, and that's not an easy task since it weighs about 300 pounds. I found that my mobile shop cart was just about the right height to slide it off of the truck. And now I can wheel it into the barn, but not all the way into the shop because of the threshold. In the end, it was too awkward and heavy to get it over the threshold as is, so I opened up the box and started taking out as much as I could. The cast iron table is really heavy, so I got that out of there, and then removed anything else that I could. After that, I was able to get it all into the shop. I also got the wheel bracket set to make moving it around the shop a lot easier. Now that I have it all in the shop, it's time to assemble it, starting with the base. There's a handy bag of tools included with the saw, and the base is fairly easy to assemble, other than a few bolts and tight corners. The base is the majority of the work to assemble this bandsaw. Most of the rest is all in one piece already. There are a few other bits and pieces that will need to be attached to the machine, including the very heavy tabletop. It also comes with a tall fence for resawing, which will really come in handy. The rest of the setup was pretty simple, and once I had it done, it was time to test it out by resawing one of the old reclaimed boards. This board is the same one that I milled down in the barn renovation video. I'll add a card on screen if you want to watch that video. And the bandsaw cut through that like nothing. So let's talk a little about this saw. As I mentioned already, it has 13-inch resaw capacity. When I first turned it on, I was surprised just how quiet it was, and there's little to no vibration. And what's the best way to show how smooth the saw is? How about the nickel test? The saw has cast iron wheels, so they're nice and heavy and help to reduce any vibration. The downside of a cast iron wheel though is when you turn it off, it'll take a while to come to a complete stop, and this one doesn't have a brake. So be careful around the machine that you may think is off, because even though you can't hear it, the blade still may be moving. The motor on this unit is 1 3/4 horsepower, and that should be more than enough for my needs. For dust collection, there's a 4-inch dust port on the backside, but as you can see by all the dust in here, I haven't hooked that up yet. This blade guide bar is very easy to raise and lower. Just loosen the locking knob and crank the wheel in whatever direction you need. The rack and pinion gearing system makes it effortless to raise or lower the guide bar. Items like this show the quality of this saw. So far, I'm quite pleased with it. It even has an outlet on the back of the saw so you could plug in a lamp with a clamp to help you see a little better. Or maybe you could plug in another small bandsaw. Rikon boasts that they have guide bearings that can be adjusted without the use of tools. You simply turn the knob, and then the spring tension allows you to easily move the bearing to the desired position. Then you just tighten the knob again. This is a lot more convenient than the old system that used a hex wrench or Allen key. Everything here looks to be well made. I didn't have to do any adjustments since it was all pretty well adjusted right out of the box. This blade insert in the tabletop has small adjustment screws, so you can get it nice and flush with the table. It's also been made to look like Swiss cheese, presumably to help with dust collection. Once I set up some proper dust collection, I suppose I can put that to the test. The table is quite large, measuring 21.5 inches wide and 15 3/4 inches deep. It's made from cast iron and is solid and quite heavy, as I found out when trying to move this into the shop. There's also a tilting mechanism controlled by this dial here. You can go up to 45 degrees one way and -7 degrees the other way. There's also a depth stop, so you can easily set the table back to 0. The fence on this is really quite well done. You can alternate between a tall fence and a short fence. The fence rail is long enough that you can use the fence on the other side of the blade if you need to. This just allows you to make angled cuts without the fence getting in the way. I don't know if I'll ever use that feature, but it's nice to know it's there if I need it. It also has this drift adjustment to make sure it runs parallel to the blade. Again, no tools are needed, so that's a bit of a time saver. This saw also has the option to slow down the blade speed. You just turn this handle till the belt loosens enough, then you can move the belt to a larger drive wheel. I believe that this is used if you want to cut non-ferrous metals. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments below. On the back of the saw is a lever that is used to release the tension in the blade. This of course is used when changing the blade, but it's also wise to remove blade tension when not in use, to prolong the life of the blade. This lever is pretty handy and it makes it quite simple to release the tension when needed. The blade tension needs to be more or less depending on the thickness of the blade being used. You can adjust that with the wheel on the top, and in this little window you can see the blade tension indicator that will show you if you have the correct tension. I have heard that these are not generally very accurate. It seems to be accurate for the current blade that I have in there, but I have not yet changed the blade and tested if it was accurate or not. Speaking of blades, this saw can handle a range of blades between 3 1/16 inch to 3/4 inch, and the blade length is 111 inches. This is a very standard blade length, so you can buy blades for this most anywhere, rather than only from the manufacturer. When installing the blade, or just adjusting one, there's a dial for the blade tracking on the back, and a handy little window on the side to check and see if the blade's centered. The wheel is also covered with a yellow rubber instead of a dark rubber, which really makes the blade stand out. My first impressions of the saw are very good. The quality of the materials are high end, from the paint to the cast iron wheels, right down to the guide bearings. There are a few things on the saw that were obviously used to keep the cost down. All the handles and knobs are plastic rather than metal. They do seem to be a nice solid plastic, but they likely won't last as long as metal ones would. I haven't had a chance to use the saw too much yet, but so far I'm impressed with the quality. Maybe that will change over time, but for now I couldn't be happier with the purchase. I would definitely recommend this saw to anyone looking for a new bandsaw. I'm mostly going to be using the saw to resaw the boards that I pulled off the walls in the barn reno. Then I'm going to put that resawn wood into the SnapMaker CNC and make all kinds of fun and interesting projects. Click here to learn more about the SnapMaker 3-in-1 machine.